Starting at number 10, here we have the country of Germany. Germany has become a leader in European politics, while they're also commanding one of Europe's strongest economies. The country has long been one of the most powerful nations in the world, and now here are some of the military capabilities and firepowers that Germany has. So based on their power index rating, it's 0.2186, and they have a total military personnel of 212,650. Their aircraft total at 712, and that ranks them 17th in the entire world. Also, they rank 20th in the world when it comes to fighter aircraft. They have 128 in their arsenal. Germany has 245 combat tanks, 80 total naval assets, all funded with a defense budget of $50 billion. Now, coming in at number 9, the nation we have is Turkey. So Turkey joins China as well as India in attempting to become a large-scale military supplier through several high-profile and ongoing developing programs. Turkey is considered to be the most powerful Muslim country in the entire world, and Turkey has the 9th most powerful military. Their power index rating is 0.2089, and they have a total military personnel of 735,000. Now, their total aircraft strength is 1,055, and that ranks them 9th in the entire world. Also, their fighter aircraft count is 206, which ranks them 14th in the world. Turkey also has 2,622 combat tanks, and that puts them in at number 9th in terms of combat tanks in the entire world. Their total naval assets sit at 149, and they fund their military with a defense budget of $19 billion. Moving on now to the nation number 8, we have the United Kingdom. So despite its size, the United Kingdom, it maintains one of the strongest economies as well as fighting forces of any nation in the entire world. Now, the UK has some of the most capable intelligence agencies as well as one of the best elite forces in the world. Every aspect of their military is just pretty stellar. So let's take a look at their stats when we break it down. Their power index rating is 0.1717. The United Kingdom's total military personnel sit at 275,660, and their total aircraft strength is 733, which ranks them 15th in the world. And now their fighter aircraft count is 133, which puts them at 19th in the world. Their combat tank total is 227, and that puts them at 57th in the entire world. And their total naval assets sit at 88, and they fund their military with a defense budget of $55.1 billion. And by the way, guys, these defense budgets are being quoted in US dollars. Moving on to South Korea at number 7. So their current military capabilities and available manpower for their nation is pretty impressive. Like, they have a very sizable defense budget as well, and they're quickly building their armed forces, especially with their unpredictable neighbors in the north. They have a power index rating of 0.1509, and they have a total military personnel of 3,680,000. Their total aircraft strength is 1,649, which ranks them 5th in the world. And they have a total fighter aircraft count at 414, and that ranks them at 6th in that category. They're also ranked 11th in their combat tanks. They have 2,614 in their possession, and their total naval assets are 234, and their defense budget, $44 billion. Japan comes in at number 6, and of course Japan is one of the most influential nations in the entire world. Like, it has one of the largest global economies, and in regards to their military power, I mean, Japan has one of the largest military budgets. Also, it has some pretty modern military weapon systems. They have a revised constitution, and they're expanding their military, so we could see Japan with an even more powerful military in the future, probably becoming the most powerful Asia-Pacific nation. But let's see what Japan's stats say. They have a power index rating of 0.1501, and their total military personnel sit at 303,160. They rank 6th when it comes to total aircraft strength. They have 1,561. They're in 9th spot when it comes to their fighter aircraft. They have 279 in their possession. Now, their combat tank total sits at 1,004, and that ranks them in the 21st place in the entire world. Their total naval assets are 155, and they have a defense budget of $49 billion. Moving on, the nation at number 5, halfway in, is France. Now, France not only is a big player when it comes to the fashion industry, but also has a pretty powerful military. It has one of the largest economies in the world also, and France has been able to put its military to use in places like Syria, Libya, Mali, as well as other enemy military forces. Their power index rating is 0.1702, and I know I've been quoting these power index ratings, just letting you know, I know we're halfway in this episode, but the lower the number, the more powerful the nation is, and this is all according to NATO. Now, their total military personnel for France sits at 451,635. They have a total aircraft strength of 1,248, which ranks them 8th in the world, and their fighter aircraft strength is 269, and that ranks 11th in the world. In terms of combat tanks, they rank 32nd in the world with 528, and they have 180 total naval assets, all with a defense budget of $41.5 billion. The nation coming in at number 4 is India. So India is looking to advance beyond the title of a top military importer to one of a top military exporter. Now, the second most populous nation in the world, of course, is India. So with that population, you know their manpower has to be very high. And that's one reason why they have such a powerful military. Their power index rating is 0.0953, and they have a total military personnel of 3,544,000. They rank 4th in the world when it comes to total aircraft strength. They have 2,082 in their possession. Their fighter aircraft count sit at 538, and that ranks them 4th in the world. Their combat tanks total 4,292, and that puts them at the 5th spot. Now, their total naval assets sit at 285, and they have a massive defense budget of $61 billion. All right, only 3 more nations left. China continues to promote its technological advances while increasing its military strength through show of force initiatives. Yeah, they really want to be the top in the world. And as for now, China has a very strong political influence in the world, and it's the world's most populous nation, but it has the 3rd strongest military. So let's take a look to see how their stats break down. For their power index rating, that sits at 0.0691, and they have a total military personnel of 2,693,000. Now, they rank 3rd in the world for total aircraft strength, and that's at 3,210. Their fighter aircraft count sit at 1,232, and that ranks them 2nd in the world. They have 3,500 combat tanks in their possession, and that ranks them at 7th in the world in that category. And they have a lot of naval assets, 777. And now they have a pretty monstrous defense budget at $237 billion. Now let's take a look at the nation number 2, Russia. They're led by, of course, President Vladimir Putin, and Russia has one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Like, just take a look when we get into their stats. They have a massive modernization and procurement program that's in effect, as well as, having a lot of military action against the neighboring country of Ukraine. Russia has really showed its prominence in the region, and this ripples out on the world scale as well, because they're the largest country in the world by area, as well as Russia has some of the best trained military personnel in the entire world. With that said, their military power index rating is 0.0681, and they have a total military personnel of 3,013,628. Russia ranks 2nd in the world with the total aircraft strength. Russia ranks number 2 in the world when it comes to aircraft strength. They have 4,163. They rank 3rd in the world for fighter aircraft because they have 873 in their possession. They rank number 1 when it comes to combat tanks. Let's check this out. 12,950 they have in their military. And their total naval assets sit at 603. They have a defense budget of $48 billion. But they weren't powerful enough to take the number 1 spot. That, of course, goes to the United States. Like, we all knew this was coming. Like, you could have just skipped to the end of this video and you knew the United States was going to be in the number 1 spot. Although it has the most powerful military in the world. It doesn't mean the United States is always effective in their missions anyways. But either way, the United States military possesses the most modernized and sophisticated military weapon systems. Of course, they spend a lot when it comes to their military. They're a powerful nation, but don't take my word for it. Let's just take a look at the stats of the United States and see how they break down. So their power index rating according to NATO is 0.0606. They have a total military personnel of 2,260,000. Now their total aircraft strength is 13,264. They rank, of course, number 1 in the world. They have the most fighter aircrafts in the world as well, with 2,085. Of course, that ranks them number 1 in the world. When it comes to combat tanks, they rank 2nd in the world with 6,289, and they have 490 total naval assets. And the United States, they have a defense budget of $750 billion. That's like more than all these other nations combined. There's absolutely no doubt that they're number 1. Starting off with number 10, we have the country of North Korea. The Korean People's Army, or the KPA, is among the worst and weakest armies on the planet because of its inferiority compared to other military personnel, since most of their troops are used for forced labor. And reports from 2012 found that most KPA officials were actually either unarmed and very underfed, and they looked just plain weak. They could barely march in a straight line. And on top of that, they also use outdated equipment as well as camouflage that are completely unsuitable for the terrain in the country. And they have limited equipment. Now, it's not surprising that on the surface, North Korea may look like a powerful military country, but their bark definitely is more powerful than their bite. Moving on to number 9, we have the country of Iraq. Despite being possibly the 4th largest army under the rule of Saddam Hussein, Iraq now consists of about 26 units with years of training by both the United States and the British military forces. Now that may sound amazing and awesome, but it's among the weakest armies in the world. Lawmakers in Iraq actually discovered 50,000 ghost soldiers in their ranks, and these were people who would just accept paychecks but never really show up for duty. So this is how back in the year 2014, Western Iraq was easily overrun by extremist groups. Despite Iraq having billions of dollars in military aid, they are among the weakest military forces, which is very surprising. Number 8 brings us the Philippines. The Philippines is a beautiful place for vacation and an amazing place to visit and of course to live. But if they were ever attacked, good luck. With only about $2 billion going into upgrading their country's navy as well as their air force, it has among the weakest of all the armies in the world. Also, they're utilizing 60-year-old equipment, so it's not too difficult to see how the Philippines is one of the most ill-equipped military forces in the world, especially with other countries like China building up their military in the area. Of course, you need to have advancement in your military if you gotta defend yourself against nations like China. Number 7 brings us Mongolia. So being that they are a landlocked country as well, Mongolia has no need for a navy. But despite that, their budget for defense is very tiny and their resources are even more limited. So they're situated between Russia and China, and Mongolia has absolutely no way of protecting itself from Chinese or Russian armies, since it has among the weakest armies in the world. While they may have a highly undervalued military force, the Mongolian forces are very proficient in recognizing and using old Soviet-made arms and equipment. So you see, if a Russian and a Chinese war were to break out, Mongolia would be ill-prepared because they're just caught in the crosshairs of both of these great military-powered countries. The country number 6 is Luxembourg. Interestingly, despite having one of the weakest armies on the planet, Luxembourg is one of the most restful and peaceful places in all of Europe, in fact, even the world. Now, their military forces are a little over 400 soldiers, and about 100 of those are civilians. And given the fact the country is only around 100,000 square miles, it's clear that the military service may not be a priority for their government. Now, Luxembourg's army only has a budget of around $369 million. And on top of that, their air force only has 17 Boeing E-3 Sentry aircrafts and just one Airbus A400M Atlas. Just goes to show you that they're very vulnerable as a landlocked country as well. All right, so the country and the army at number 5 is Gambia. The Republic of Gambia is a West African country, and it's filled with its own civil wars and, of course, other internal struggles. Now, with around 2.3 million people for a population, nearly 1/3 of them live below the poverty line, and that means that their military is heavily affected by this. Made up of two units, the National Army and the Gambian Navy, about 2,500 personnel make up one of the weakest armies in the world. Their National Army has a few armored vehicles, and most of their soldiers tend to be sent off to other African nations just for peacekeeping missions. And back since the year 1965, they became independent from the United Kingdom, and the Gambian military force has simply struggled since then. But now they seem to be prospering a little bit more recently with Taiwanese donations of armored vessels, which are meant to really replace their outdated Navy ships. Country number 4 is Eritrea. They are dubbed Africa's North Korea. Whoa. Okay, so surprising as it is, Eritrea's armed forces tend to be used for forced labor instead of fighting off other enemy forces. Their army consists of the highest concentration of men in the entire world of armies that are enlisted by their government. Moving on now to country number 3, we have Tonga. Now, this country is made up of 169 islands with nearly 103,000 people. Now, Tonga is barely able to enter into Air Force battles since they only have 2 small aircrafts. There's also the fact that their military budget is about $5 million. That's barely anything, and that makes up about 0.9% of the country's GDP. Their armed forces contains about 700 active personnel, and despite this, the fact that their navy consists of 3 patrol boats and a tanker meant solely for fishing zone and border regulations. They fought back in the First World War, and in more recent years, they were sent to Afghanistan and Iraq. Country number 2 is St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, this country is located in the West Indies, and it's home to about 55,000 people. St. Kitts and Nevis is definitely one of the weakest armies in the world. Their forces consist of about 300 troops total, not to mention the fact that their Coast Guard has 1 boat, which is actually donated to them by the United States. Now, on top of that, the St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Forces, they deal a lot with only internal issues as well as policing the waters of their country. And check this out, back in the year 2016, their army only enlisted about 28 recruits total. So we've seen some weak armies in this episode, but none come close to Costa Rica. Unfortunately for Costa Rica, it's among the few countries that have the weakest armies in the planet, simply because they don't even have one. Article 12 of the Constitution of Costa Rica actually forbids a standing military since the year 1949. It does, however, have public force with limited military capabilities, and their main role includes law enforcement as well as internal security and the command of entities like their Air Vigilance Service and their Costa Rican Civil Guard. Similarly, other countries without armed forces include Panama, Vanuatu, Iceland, Mauritius, and Monaco. All right, so starting off with the first nation at number 10, we have Saudi Arabia with the Saudi Arabian Army. Saudi Arabia surpasses Egypt for the 10th spot of the largest armies in the world. There's a huge amount of money that's being spent on the Saudi Arabian army every single year, and it means that the country has one of the best equipped armed forces. They have a total active personnel of 478,000. Now, the Royal Saudi Land Forces are composed of 3 armored brigades, 5 mechanized brigades, 1 airborne brigade, 1 Royal Guard brigade, and 8 artillery battalions. The army also has 1 aviation command with 2 aviation brigades. Moving on to number 9, we have Vietnam with the People's Army of Vietnam. Vietnam ranks number 9 in this episode with a total active personnel count of 482,000 people. Now, in the backdrop of the resurgent China, the Social Republic of Vietnam has been strengthening its armed forces. Now, the organizations and establishments of the People's Army of Vietnam started way back in 1944, all to remove the French colonial forces as well as the Japanese occupiers under the guidance of Ho Chi Minh. Their army is made up of course, their ground force, their navy, their air force, the border defense force, as well as coast guards. However, Vietnam does not have a separate ground force or army branch. It's kind of like all put together in one. Number 8 brings us Iran with their Islamic Republic of Iran Army. Iran comes in at number 8 in this episode, and they have a total active personnel of 523,000. When it comes to the modern history of Iran, the Iranian army was founded about 100 years ago, and the current form, the Islamic Republic, is a little less younger than that. Now, their headquarters are located in Tehran, Iran, and the mission is to protect territorial integrity of the Iranian state from external and internal threats. Now, the Iranian army, or the Artesh as they're called in Persian, has its own joint staff which coordinates its 4 separate service branches, and those are the ground forces, Air Force, the Navy, and there's also the Air Defense Forces. South Korea comes in at number 7, and their army is the Republic of Korea Army. They have a total active personnel count of 625,000. Now, the Republic of Korea Armed Forces was founded on August 15th, 1948, and their headquarters are in Seoul, South Korea. They were formally organized into 3 armies: the 1st Army, the 3rd Army, and the 2nd Operational Command. Now, each of them had their own headquarters, their own corps, and their own divisions. After restructuring, though, the 2nd Army was converted as the 2nd Operations Command, and that was in the year 2007, and the 1st and the 3rd Armies were merged as the Ground Operations Command, and that happened very recently in 2019. The Pakistan Army is at number 6, and they have a total personnel count of 654,000. Their army came into existence on August 14th, 1947, and it has its headquarters in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. The army's primary objective is of national security and national unity. And the Pakistani army is a voluntary force, and the army during disasters and emergency conducts humanitarian rescue operations at home, as well as participates in peacekeeping missions in different parts of the world. Pakistan also has the most amount of women in an army among the Islamic countries. Alright, so moving on to number 5, we have the ground forces of the Russian Federation. Russia has a total active personnel count of 1,013,628, and of course it's 5th on this list. The army was founded in the year 1992, and its major structural reorganization began in the year 2009. The Russian Ministry of Defense has its own headquarters at Moscow, and the main command of the ground forces consists of the main staff of the ground troops and the department force for peacekeeping forces. There's also the armaments of the ground troops and the rare services of the ground troops. There's the cadres of the ground forces troops, indoctrination work, as well as military education. And the branches of service include motorized rifles, tanks, artillery and rocket forces, troop air defense, special corps, reconnaissance signals, radio electronic warfare, engineering, nuclear, biological and chemical protection, logistical support, automobile, as well as the protection of their rear. There's also military units and logistics establishments. A whole lot going on in Russia's army. The nation coming at number 4 is North Korea. Their army is called the Korean People's Army Ground Forces. Now, North Korea has a total active personnel of 1,280,000. Their army is believed to have been founded back in the year 1932, and their headquarters are located at Pyongyang in North Korea. Their army consists of 5 branches. There's the ground force, the Navy, the Air Force, and the strategic rocket forces, as well as the special operations. Alright guys, 3 nations left, and coming at the number 3 spot, we have the United States with the United States Army. So the United States is very well equipped, and it has a total active personnel count of 1,281,900 people. The Army was founded over 200 years ago, and the US Army is the 3rd largest in the entire world. Now, the mission of the Army includes preserving the peace and security, as well as providing for the defense of the United States and the Commonwealths, as well as the possessions and areas occupied by the United States. Now, its headquarters are at Arlington County in Virginia in the United States, and it's the largest military branch of the United States Armed Forces. The Army is part of the Department of the Army, which is one of 3 military departments of the Department of Defense. But moving on to the nation at number 2 with the 2nd largest army in the world, the Indian Army. They have a total active personnel count of 1,362,500. Their army headquarters are located in New Delhi, India, and initially the army's objective was to defend the nation's frontiers. Now, over the years now, the responsibility of protecting the country internally began to develop more and more. It has an all-volunteer force, and it comprises of more than 80% of the country's active defense personnel. The army is still looking to expand as they have embarked on an infantry modernization program known as Futuristic Infantry Soldier as a System, and it's also requiring new assets for its armored artillery as well as aviation branches. But India is not large enough to take the #1 spot, because that goes to China and their People's Liberation Army ground forces. So China's troops total at 2,183,000. Their mission, of course, is to ensure that China is secured and stays safe. With the continuous advancements in the types of army equipment, as well as having the second largest defense budget in the entire world, China ain't playing around. The army is the largest as well as the oldest branch of the Republic of China's armed forces, and there are 13 core-sized army groups of China since the end of April 2017. Now, they're divided among 5 theater commands: the Eastern, Southern, Northern, Western, and Central commands. Within the theater command, starting in 2011, the divisions are being downsized into full brigades: armored, mechanized infantry, field artillery, air defense artillery, engineering, as well as logistical brigades. But either way, let's just jump into this episode. Starting at number 10, we have the China's People's Liberation Army. China's army has to go through a 17-step obstacle course that includes swimming, climbing, and leaping over or through objects that are set on fire. Now, even if you do it perfectly or you're in good physical condition, the training is pretty intense. Like, it's gonna destroy you. Like, not exactly though, but like, you're gonna feel it. So candidates, they're required to also hold their breath underwater for 1 minute. And if they even try to come up for a second to get a little bit of air, boom, nope, they're dunked right back down. You gotta stay there for a minute. Don't try to extend that minute. Moving on to number 9, we have India's National Security Guard Commandos, or the NSG. Organizations within India's armed forces, they test potential soldiers by giving them only a day's worth of food and water, and then they're left in a remote place like a jungle to survive and find their way back. Now, that's just an entry-level test for India's NSG. Some are so determined to join the NSG that they actually finish with food and water left over just to impress the people that are testing them. One training method also requires candidates to get beats from local people as an endurance test. And there's another test that they have to pass where they need to pass target practice while drunk. And this is to simulate firing your weapon under unusual conditions. Now, we know the Russia's Spetsnaz, they had to be in this episode. So the training and the selection process for the Spetsnaz is a long 5-year process. Now, the first 5 months alone are designed to break recruits and then build them back up so they're willing to perform tactics that their superiors want them to perform. But the good thing though for Spetsnaz is that their operatives get to select their own non-commissioned officers from within their ranks, instead of letting their superiors make that choice for them during the review process. But their training tactics are kept really hush-hush. We don't know too much about them, but we just know it's really intense. Number 7, we have Australia's Special Air Service Regiment. Now, there's one aspect of their training called resistance to interrogation. Now, one actual operative described the experience of the training and said that a white bag was put on his head, and then he was stripped and taken to a cell, and then he was put in stress positions for hours and deprived of sleep. So if he even started to doze off or even looked like he was even thinking about dozing off slightly, he was slapped back to remain awake for 3 days straight. Now, the Special Air Service Regiment has not disclosed all of their training methods, but apparently more people have lost their lives training to join them than actual recruits that were sent on real operations. US Navy SEALs is up next at number 6. So perhaps the most popular group in this episode. We see the Navy SEALs everywhere, in media, in the video games, all of that. But while their 30-month average training program is only about half of what the Spetsnaz is, it condenses a lot of intensity into 1 week during the first 3 weeks called Hell Week.
After that, the plebes head to their dorm at Bancroft Hall.
What's your company?
And assemble on an area known as Red Beach, tasked with teaching proper protocol to the plebes.
Now study and know the entire chain of command. Do you understand me?
These are the ones that we're going to serve with in the future, and they want them to be the best that they can possibly be.
Now, on 4 hours of sleep, candidates, they have to spend 5.5 days constantly covered in mud and in the cold, performing training exercises on coastal environments, as well as paddling and doing extreme exercises and fighting just to stay awake, among other things. Now, the crazy part is that their trainers yell at them to quit, and they taunt them by eating and drinking food in front of them. However, although the training is intense, there is emergency medical staff that's available all the time, just in case. At number 5, we have the Israeli Shayatet. Now, over the course of 20 months, they must go through training and diving under extreme cold conditions with no visibility, power drop operations, demolitions, and more. And now those who qualify are then assigned to air, sea, and land operations based on which one they did the best in. Now, trainees are also sent out on real missions in pretty much the worst possible circumstances. The Shayatet also has medical personnel on hand at all times because, the training is so intense, anything could happen. Moving on to number 4, we have the South Korean Special Warfare Command. Now, this training course goes on for 10 days, and while they're there, they experience training in low temperatures because they train outside. They don't even wear shirts for their training. They have to run and do sit-ups and even wrestle each other in freezing snow. That's probably the worst thing I've ever heard of for a training exercise in this whole episode, or just in general. Now, here's the thing though, everyone also needs to have a black belt in Taekwondo, but that's the easy part. These guys should have been number 1. They're training outside in the snow without shirts. The training at number 3 is UK Special Air Service. Candidates for the SAS, they're dumped in the middle of nowhere and told to cover 40 miles in 20 hours while carrying a 60-pound weight and rifle.
Hold it. Keep it there.
Go. Everything you've got, 20G. Come on, everything you've got.
Boys, there's no way of getting through.
Also, they have no food except just a bottle of water with them. Now, their uniforms and their boots are chosen to not fit them. Like, this is done purposely. Now, for those who actually complete it in the time that's required, they then have to perform a 4-mile run only in half an hour. Now, here we have the Pakistani Special Services Group, or the SSG, coming in at number 2. Now, these guys, of course, are very, very, very intense and hardcore. Pakistan puts their trainees through an endurance run on a stricter timeline than the UK does. Now, after 2 years of service in the regular Pakistani military, a service member is then eligible for SSG selection. During an 8-month training period, soldiers are required to cover 36 miles of territory in only 12 hours, and then they have to run 5 miles in 45 minutes with a full pack. Now, at the end of the 8 months, SSG candidates have to perform 7 paradrops, and 5 of them are done during the day and 2 of them are done at night. Now then, after that, they proceed to the advanced commando training. And that's where they have to spend half of a year doing commando training. And when that's complete, they get to join the SSG. But guys, we've seen some intense training, but number 1 definitely is the United Kingdom's Gurkhas. Because of their living conditions already, like the Nepalese people who apply for this British military group, they're subjected to punishing tests. And this is even before they can even think of applying. But either way, the initial tests are pretty basic. They have some running and pull-up exercises, and then comes the real testing. So recruits are required to run 5 kilometers while wearing a 25-kilogram weight. And those 5 kilometers, they come with a 400-meter rise in incline and done through a very rocky and dusty terrain, which has to be done in only 45 minutes. This is so unfair. Like, we've done videos about the Nepalese Gurkhas before, so we know that they're a very hardcore group. But what the UK puts them through, it's pretty much impossible. You pretty much failed before you even started. Nevertheless, the Nepalese are so determined that some of them definitely make it through. How? I do not know.